Hello, David Cook. I'm Swy. Today, I would like to conduct a phone interview with you about the mysterious experiences you've had, the 2 times you went missing at the eerie Skinwalker Ranch.
Hello, Swy. I've truly been waiting for this day. My story isn't just about the disappearance, but about a force far beyond human understanding.
That's right, you heard it correctly. This is David Cook, the man who disappeared twice at one of the most mysterious and terrifying places in the world. Today, we will hear his harrowing story about his disappearance and the strange occurrences at Skinwalker Ranch, a place where not everyone is lucky enough to return to tell the tale. What did he see? And what is really happening in this eerie land?
Skinwalker Ranch. Just hearing the name is enough to send chills down your spine. It's a desolate land nestled between the remote hills and valleys of Utah, a place filled with mysterious stories and supernatural phenomena that no one can explain. Strange disappearances, bizarre lights in the sky, and even the laws of physics seem completely broken here. For those who have set foot on this land, like myself, Skinwalker Ranch is not just a cursed piece of land. It's a gateway into another world, a world where invisible entities are silently observing us. This story began centuries ago when the Navajo tribe once lived in this region. According to their legends, skinwalkers were dark witches capable of transforming into dangerous creatures, often wolves. The Navajo people avoided this land, believing the witches could control minds and manipulate humans. Those tales weren't just ancient folklore, they remain part of the unsolved mystery today. In the late 20th century, when the Sherman family bought Skinwalker Ranch, they were immediately thrust into a labyrinth of unexplainable events. Strange lights appeared in the sky, roars from unseen creatures echoed, and bone-chilling winds blew through even in the heat of summer. But the most terrifying event was the disappearance of their livestock. The animals weren't just killed, they were surgically mutilated with eerie precision, without a trace of blood, as if they had been abducted by something not of this world. I've lived with that feeling, the sense that I was just a pawn in a game I couldn't control or escape. When I first disappeared at Maroon Bells, Colorado, all they found was my car and a few vague witness statements. A massive search was organized, but no one could find me. What really happened? Was I simply a victim of an accident, or had I been taken by the entities at Skinwalker Ranch, brought into a dimension that no one can comprehend? The question remains unanswered. Skinwalker Ranch lies on the boundary between reality and a world humanity hasn't yet touched. The phenomena here, the strange lights, the unexplained disappearances, all make us wonder. Is this place a crossing point for supernatural and extraterrestrial forces? Or is it a gateway to a network of entities beyond human understanding? And the truth is, I'm not sure I ever returned completely normal after everything that happened. The darkness in the dense forest at Maroon Bells, Colorado, truly has a mesmerizing allure, like a magnificent natural painting that everyone wants to immerse themselves in. I, an adventurer born to live among the wild mountains, felt the pulse of life through the rugged trails, lush green valleys, and snow-covered peaks. For me, nature was not just a physical challenge, but a place where I could find peace for my soul. It was a place where only I and the majestic wilderness existed. A place where I felt absolute freedom. One weekend in September, I decided to embark on a journey to Maroon Bells, a favorite destination for adventurers like me. With excitement and a passion for exploration, I planned to climb distant mountains, camp under the clear night sky, and breathe the fresh air. Every step I took along the narrow trail, every glance through my binoculars, made me feel as though I was becoming one with the powerful and awe-inspiring nature around me, as if I were an inseparable part of it. But then, something strange began to happen. From the very first days of the journey, the eerie silence of the forest no longer brought the peace it once did. Instead, the atmosphere became heavy, foreboding. The shadows between the trees seemed to stretch out, as if trying to swallow me into the unknown. I told myself it was just the fatigue from hours of hiking, but deep down, a sense of unease slowly crept into my mind. Then I noticed the first signs of something unusual, the sudden disappearance of wildlife. The forest, once lively with the sounds of birds chirping and animals moving, had fallen into an eerie stillness. There were no signs of life anywhere. A growing sense of dread began to overtake my thoughts, but I pushed forward, convinced that I was a brave adventurer, not easily shaken by strange occurrences in the wilderness. Things got worse when night fell. On the first night at my campsite, I began to hear strange noises around me. At first, it was just a soft rustling sound, like the wind brushing through the leaves. But over time, the noise became clearer and more terrifying. The sound of footsteps, dragging along the ground, as if something was approaching me in the darkness. But when I bravely stepped out to check, all I found was a haunting silence and thick darkness. In the following days, as I continued my hike, the feeling of being watched became undeniable. I could sense that something invisible was observing my every move. Sometimes I would turn around suddenly, hoping to catch sight of whatever it was, but all I saw were the still trees and the suffocating darkness. The air around me grew heavier, as if with every step I was being stalked by some unseen force. Then, one morning, before the sun had a chance to break through the thick clouds, I saw something I had never seen before. A strange object appeared in the sky, at first just a small point of light, but it quickly grew larger and moved at an unimaginable speed. It didn't resemble any aircraft I had ever known, and its movements far surpassed the capabilities of modern technology. The object hovered for a long time before disappearing, without leaving any trace. My heart began to race, fear mixed with curiosity. But instead of turning back, I decided to delve deeper into my journey. Perhaps that was my biggest mistake. By the 5th day of the trip, I had wandered into an area that seemed to have never existed on the map. I had been meticulously tracking my path, but the landscape around me changed in bizarre ways. Giant boulders stood towering before me, forming strange shapes like natural sculptures that carried an indescribable sense of mystery. I felt like I had stepped into another world, a place where the laws of physics no longer applied. The air around me grew dense, and time seemed to slow down. The further I ventured, the more everything became abnormal. Mysterious streaks of light shimmered across the cliffs, only to vanish the moment I blinked. At times I heard someone calling my name from afar, but when I turned, there was nothing but absolute silence. I began to feel that I had gone too far, beyond the boundary of safety. When I approached a small stream, I saw a figure in a black cloak standing silently. At first I thought it was just a hallucination caused by exhaustion and stress. But then the figure moved, slowly approaching me. I screamed in panic, but there was no response. I turned and ran, my heart pounding wildly, my body trembling with fear. I ran until I was exhausted, finally collapsing onto a large rock. When I looked up, the figure had vanished, but the feeling, that cold, chilling fear, still haunted me. I knew I was no longer safe here, and the worst part was that I had completely lost my way. All signs of the trail, the markers I had carefully noted, had disappeared. My map and compass were useless. The compass spun wildly, as if it had lost its function. I realized that I had become trapped in a space where the natural laws no longer existed. Time passed slowly, and every moment was a battle between hope and despair. I wondered, would I ever find my way out? Or would I disappear forever, just like the countless other mysterious stories that have taken place in this land? I sat down on a large rock, my breath ragged, fear seeping into every fiber of my being. My body trembled not only from exhaustion, but also from the invisible terror consuming my mind. The faint light from the last rays of the day faded, giving way to the thick darkness that enveloped the entire forest. The darkness seemed to swallow everything. I tried to look around, hoping to find something familiar, but there was only eerie silence and no sound except for the frantic pounding of my heart in my chest. I knew I had wandered into another world. The fundamental principles of space, time, and physics had been completely erased. Nothing was normal anymore. My mind reeled, caught between reality and illusion. Images of family, friends, and everyday life blurred, replaced by the horrifying experiences I was going through. I asked myself whether someone, or something, was controlling all of this. Perhaps I was merely a pawn in the game of supernatural entities, like the stories of Skinwalker Ranch, where humans are nothing more than weak creatures, observed and experimented on without respect. In that moment, I felt an icy cold wind moving toward me. A strong gust swept through the trees, scattering dry leaves. My vision started to blur, and everything around me began to spin. It felt like my heart was about to explode, my breath becoming labored. I tried to stand, but my legs were heavy, as if they were being held down by some invisible force. And then I heard footsteps. At first they were faint, but they grew louder and clearer. They weren't coming from a single direction, but echoed from all around me. I strained my eyes to see, but there was nothing, only thick darkness. My heart raced, and cold sweat trickled down my spine. I shouted in panic, "Who's there?" But only silence answered me, along with the steady, heavy footsteps closing in. No longer able to stay calm, I leapt up and ran. I didn't know where I was running to, only that I needed to leave this place as fast as possible. Branches snagged on my clothes, sharp rocks cut through my hiking boots, but I felt nothing but the overwhelming fear surrounding me. The darkness, like a giant beast, swallowed every step I took. No matter how fast I ran, the footsteps followed, never slowing, never stopping. I kept running until I could no longer move, collapsing onto the wet ground. The footsteps seemed to be right beside me now, loud and terrifying. My body couldn't move, pinned down by some unseen force. I panted, trying to crawl, but all my strength had been drained. It felt as though something was pulling me into the darkness, into nothingness. Everything became blurry, fading away as if I were sinking into a nightmare I couldn't escape. In the midst of my panic, I saw a figure. It wasn't an illusion but a real shape, standing tall before me. A hazy figure with lifeless eyes staring down at me, emotionless, silent. I couldn't understand what it was, but it certainly wasn't human, at least not any human I had ever seen. The figure stood there watching me as if evaluating an object. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to obey. And then, like a nightmare suddenly dissipating, the figure vanished, the footsteps stopped, and the forest fell into a deathly silence. I lay there, exhausted, confused, and unable to move. I had no idea how long I had been there, no sense of time. The only thing I knew for certain was that something, or someone, was controlling my mind and body. I was merely a pawn in their hands. After a long while, I slowly managed to crawl up. My eyes wandered aimlessly in the darkness. I tried to look around, but nothing seemed familiar. The forest had now become an endless maze. Every memory of the path I had taken, the markers I had left, had vanished from my mind. I stumbled forward aimlessly, not knowing where I was headed or what awaited me. Images of my family faintly surfaced in my thoughts, their laughter and voices drifting further away, elusive and distant. I didn't know if I would survive or disappear forever. And when I heard a strange sound echo through the trees, I knew that something even more terrifying was waiting for me ahead. Could this be the place where supernatural entities have set foot? Would I ever return? The strange sound wasn't the wind whistling through the forest, nor was it the movement of wild animals in the night. It echoed faintly, as if coming from a distant void, pulling me out of the immediate fear, but instilling a deeper dread. That sound, at first just a faint murmur, gradually grew louder, clearer, like a whisper echoing in my mind. It wasn't a language I could understand, but it carried some mysterious message that I couldn't shake off. I turned my head, trying to peer into the distance. Before me, there was only the dense, endless darkness, with no sign of life. But the sound didn't disappear. It continued, as if urging me to keep moving, to go deeper into the place that my rational mind screamed for me to avoid. It felt as though some invisible force was pulling me toward that strange sound. And though I didn't know what awaited me, my legs instinctively carried me forward. Each step was heavy, as if I were walking into an entirely different realm. The air around me suddenly turned icy cold, piercing to the bone, even though the weather had been warm just moments before. I felt every breath becoming labored, every heartbeat racing in my chest, but I no longer had control. I had been drawn into something that I couldn't resist. As the strange sound grew closer and stronger, I began to see faint lights flickering in the distance, twinkling in the darkness like stars in a mysterious night. But they weren't the light of stars or flashlights. It was an unnatural, eerie glow. It emitted a cold aura, enveloping everything around me. The closer I got, the stronger the light became, as if it were alive, moving, and calling my name. Those moments seemed to stretch into eternity. I had no sense of how long I had been walking or which direction I was heading. Everything around me began to blur. My sense of space, time, and reality faded away completely. My legs kept moving forward, but my mind seemed to be floating between different dimensions. Memories of my past life, my family, and the paths I once walked became distant and vague. And then, suddenly, the light vanished. I stood in a pitch-black void. No more light, no more strange sounds echoing. Only deadly silence and darkness engulfed everything. I tried closing my eyes, taking a deep breath, and calming myself. But even in this darkness, I could feel the presence of something. It was there, right next to me, silently watching. My heart pounded harder than ever. I turned around, straining my eyes to find something, but all I could see was endless emptiness. Everything felt like a terrible dream, a never-ending nightmare from which I couldn't escape. And then, I felt the presence moving closer. Footsteps, subtle but palpable, no longer from afar, but now right beside me, just a few steps away. I gathered all the courage I had and shouted, but all I heard was the weak, desperate echo of my own voice, lost in the void. Nothing answered, no one came. The footsteps stopped, but I could still feel the weight of an invisible gaze upon me, cold and heavy. Just when I thought I could bear it no longer, I felt an icy hand touch my shoulder. I jerked around in shock, but no one was there, only the empty darkness. Panic surged within me. I tried to run, but my legs were anchored to the ground. Just as I thought I was about to be completely consumed by this nightmare, a blinding light erupted before me, brilliant like thousands of stars. I raised my hand to shield my eyes, my heart racing. As the light slowly dimmed, an unbelievable sight appeared before me. I was standing before a massive gate spanning across both space and time. It emitted a ghostly blue light, radiating a freezing coldness. This gate did not belong to the world I knew. It opened up to a path I couldn't even begin to imagine, as if it led straight into another dimension. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Should I step through the gate or try to find a way out of here? But as the gate began to hum, as though beckoning me to cross, I realized I had no other choice. Stepping through this gate was the only way to uncover the truth, or perhaps to disappear forever. And so, unable to resist the strange pull of the gate, I stepped forward. The gate before me shimmered with a blue glow, cold and lifeless, as if it marked the boundary between life and oblivion. With every step I took toward the gate, my heart grew heavier with an unnamed fear. But at the same time, a curiosity and desire to uncover the strange truth beyond drew me closer. It was no longer a choice. The gate was now the only destination, and I had to face it. As I crossed through the gate, everything around me changed abruptly. The blue light exploded, enveloping me in a whirlwind of colors and sound. My body felt like it was being pulled into a weightless vortex. Time and space twisted and distorted, with no anchor. I tried to maintain balance, but it felt as though I was floating, no longer tethered to the ground. There was a powerful sensation of being torn away from reality, as though the world I once knew was slipping away, and I was falling into another, untouchable, unreachable. I don't know how long I was in that state, but when everything settled, the light faded, and I found myself standing on strange ground, covered in a misty haze. The surroundings were completely unfamiliar, like a distorted version of the world I once knew. Everything seemed stretched, deformed, and surreal. The ground beneath my feet felt soft, yet seemed like I was standing on a floating platform. Above, there was no sun, only endless streaks of dim light stretching across the sky. The whispers still echoed in my mind, but now they sounded like mysterious invitations. A voice with no clear source repeated itself as though it was guiding my every action. Where am I? I asked myself, but no answer came. I began to walk, but everything around me was impossibly strange. No wind, no sounds, just an eerie silence. I didn't know how long I had been walking, but suddenly, through the thick mist ahead, I saw a figure. It wasn't the invisible shadow I had seen before. This time, the figure was clearer, as though it had been waiting for me. It stood still, motionless, its eyes glowing with a pale, empty light. A chill ran down my spine as I drew closer. Every instinct told me not to approach, but I couldn't stop myself. As I neared, the figure began to move. Its lips moved, but not in any language I could understand. I stopped, my heart pounding, and then in one sudden moment, it raised its head and looked directly at me, its cold, emotionless eyes piercing straight into my mind. Why have you come here? The voice echoed, not from its mouth but inside my head, like a deep whisper in the recesses of my mind. I didn't know how to respond. My entire body was frozen, unable to move. In a panic, I tried to calm myself. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The figure started moving toward me, each slow step filled with menace. Every step seemed to shake the space around me, as if I was being held captive by a force far stronger than anything I had ever encountered. "Why have you come here?" The voice echoed again, and this time I felt a deeper fear than ever before. It wasn't a question, it was a warning. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped. With no other choice, I gathered all my courage and asked, "Who are you? Where is this place?" The figure stopped only a few steps away from me. Its empty eyes gazed at me for a moment, and then it spoke. "You do not belong here. This world is not for you." I had the overwhelming sense that I was standing before a being beyond human comprehension. Every theory, every story I had heard about Skinwalker Ranch now seemed small and meaningless. I had stepped into a place no one should enter, and now I was facing something not of our world. In a blink, the figure vanished, dissolving into the air. And I, standing still in the darkness, realized I was completely lost. The gate had closed, and I was left here, in another dimension, where the rules of the real world no longer applied. My disappearance wasn't just a terrifying event for me, but also an unfillable void for my loved ones. When I didn't return from my hike at Maroon Bells, my family descended into panic. Calls from my wife Sarah went unanswered. Her messages piled up on my phone, and the promises I hadn't fulfilled became her haunting thoughts. For her and my friends, every hour without news only heightened their fear that something terrible had happened. At first, there was hope. They believed I was simply lost or had encountered some problem, but that sooner or later I would find a way to contact them and return. After all, I was a seasoned mountaineer with years of experience facing the harshness of nature. But as days passed with no sign from me, their fears grew. The police and rescue teams were quickly mobilized. They found my car, still parked neatly at the spot where I had begun my hike. Everything inside was in order, no signs of disturbance or anything unusual happening before I ventured into the wilderness. Yet, after searching everywhere, climbing over hills, scouring valleys, no one could find any trace of me. Not a single piece of my climbing gear was left behind. No footprints, no calls for help echoed from the path I had taken. I had vanished completely, as if I had never existed. As time passed, theories about my disappearance began to surface. Some believed I might have had an accident, fallen into a deep ravine, or been swept away by a raging river. But Sarah couldn't accept that. She knew I was cautious, knew how to handle dangerous situations, and would always find a way to reach out if something went wrong. Yet the fact that no trace of me was found made these theories seem fragile and hard to believe. But for Sarah and my family, these theories were just that, theories. They didn't need stories about UFOs or supernatural forces. What they needed was my return. As each day passed, the hope in Sarah's heart slowly faded. Every night, she fell asleep with my image in her mind, wondering if I was still alive or if I was gone forever. The memories of our happy moments together now brought her nothing but lingering pain, not knowing where I was or if I was suffering out in the wild. The year has passed since I disappeared, and the pain in my family's heart has not eased. The official search has ended, and everyone seems forced to accept the truth that I may be gone forever. But the mystery surrounding my disappearance remains, along with the unanswered questions. What really happened to me? Did I have an accident, or was I drawn into the plot of some supernatural force beyond our comprehension? Although the answers remain unknown, one thing I am sure of: my disappearance has left an unhealable wound in the hearts of those I love, and they, like me, will forever live with this uncertainty. One day, amidst the despair and unanswered prayers, I suddenly returned. No one knew what had happened, and perhaps I didn't fully understand it either. I didn't remember much about that moment, a moment when reality seemed to bend, and I felt as if I was being pulled from another dimension back into the world I once knew. When I opened my eyes, the sunlight filtered through the leaves, and for the first time after what felt like endless disorientation, I realized I had returned to the real world. In front of me was the familiar trail leading out of the forest, but I couldn't recognize where I was or how I had gotten there. I stumbled toward the path, my body trembling, weak as if I had been wandering in a void for years. My clothes were torn, my shoes caked with mud, and every step was a battle to maintain balance. As I tried to look around for familiar landmarks, I could still feel the invisible fear lingering. It was as if I had returned, but hadn't entirely escaped the mysterious force that had held me. I continued walking in a haze, fragmented memories slowly resurfacing, disjointed images of what I had experienced in the darkness, of the gate of light and the soulless figure. But they were like pieces of a distant nightmare. The one thing I knew for certain was that I had returned, and my family needed to know. As I emerged from the forest, I encountered a rescue team. They couldn't believe their eyes when they saw me. The man who had been missing for a year, the one they had searched for tirelessly, now standing before them. Surprise was etched on each face, but instead of joyous cheers, there was a strange silence that enveloped us. They took me back, and the flood of questions soon gave way to worry. When I arrived home, I didn't realize a year had passed. To me, time had stood still, as if only a few days had passed since I entered Maroon Bells. But for my wife Sarah, it had been a long, painful, and confusing year. She stood at the door, staring at me in disbelief. In that moment, neither of us could speak, only stunned silence between us. Then her tears came, bursting forth in a flood of joy and release. She ran into my arms, holding me tightly as if fearing that if she let go, I would vanish once again. I could feel the pain she had endured, and I also knew that, though I had returned, something had changed forever. Sarah asked me countless questions, but I had no answers. I couldn't remember exactly what had happened. My memories seemed blocked, leaving only scattered fragments, vague feelings of fear in the darkness, of footsteps and the strange light. I couldn't explain why I had disappeared or how I had returned. The more I tried to recall, the more my head throbbed, as if something within my mind was preventing me from accessing those memories. Family and friends were overjoyed to see me back, but they couldn't hide their confusion and doubt. Everyone wanted to know what had happened, and I had nothing to offer but silence. The police and investigators tried to extract every detail from me, but all I could share were faint images of darkness and a world I never wanted to return to. But the most terrifying part was that I couldn't be certain I had fully escaped that place. Every night, as I lay down, I could still hear the whispers from that far-off place echoing in my mind. The darkness lingered on the edge of my vision, as though waiting for the moment I let my guard down to pull me back in once more. I had returned, but had I truly escaped the pull of the darkness and the entities that had taken me? Or were they still watching, waiting for the chance to drag me back? This question haunted my nights, and I knew that the terror I had endured was far from over. Theories about my disappearance, about Skinwalker Ranch and extraterrestrial entities, all of them might just be rumors. But one thing I know for sure, the place I went to, and the thing that took me, doesn't belong to this world, and I never want to experience it again. But will I be able to escape that fate? Only time will tell. After returning from that strange disappearance, nothing felt the same. My family, friends, and even I felt relief at my return. But deep down, I knew that something hadn't ended. In the early days after my return, I tried to immerse myself in everyday life, doing the things I once loved. But no matter how hard I tried, the feeling that I hadn't fully returned from that place remained. The long nights, when I drifted into sleep, always brought back dreams of the place where I had vanished. In those dreams, darkness enveloped everything. I could hear the strange footsteps again, and the lifeless eyes of the figure I encountered during my first disappearance still followed me, calling me back. Every morning when I woke, my body felt drained, my mind clouded, as if I had been fighting some force all night long. Those around me could sense the change in me. Sarah began to worry as I grew more distant. There were moments when I would sit for hours in silence, staring into nothingness, trying to recall what had happened during my disappearance. But those memories felt like a buried nightmare, unreachable in my mind. Then, strange signs started to appear. Sometimes, I would feel a bone-chilling cold breeze brush against me for no apparent reason, even when I stood in the bright, warm sunlight. At times, when walking along familiar paths, I felt as though someone was watching me, though when I turned, no one was there. Distant whispers echoed in my head, the same sounds I had heard in that place, and I knew that something was still calling me back. Not long after these phenomena began, I realized I couldn't escape. One night, in a dream, I saw the strange gate of light again, slowly opening and pulling me in. I awoke with a jolt, cold sweat dripping down my forehead. Though I tried to reassure myself it was just a dream, the feeling that the gate was waiting for me to return haunted my every breath. And then I realized I could no longer resist. The pull to return to that place grew stronger each day, unstoppable. I tried to fight it, but something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe fate, was drawing me back to where I had disappeared. This time, I knew the journey would not be like before. I was no longer the David Cook everyone once knew. I felt that I was about to step into a new nightmare, one from which I might not return intact. The sense that something was about to happen became too strong to ignore. Each day I could feel my normal life slipping further from my grasp. The simple joys I once loved no longer brought me peace. My mind was constantly occupied by vague images of that place, the place where I had vanished. I knew that if I did nothing, something far worse was waiting. One night, while Sarah was asleep, I stood silently by the window, staring into the quiet night. But I knew, deep in my mind, that tonight was different. An invisible cold enveloped the room, creeping through the cracks of the window. Outside, everything was eerily silent. No wind, no familiar sound of insects. Only dead silence. Then, I heard it. That sound, the whisper I had tried so hard to ignore, returned, clearer than ever. It wasn't just in my head anymore. It was present in the room, surrounding me, forcing me to listen. "It's time," the whisper came, soft yet commanding. I felt more clearly than ever that the gate was waiting for me, like an invitation I couldn't refuse. I turned to look at Sarah, still sleeping peacefully. A part of me wanted to wake her, to tell her I needed help, that I was terrified of what was about to happen. But another part, deep within me, knew that no one could help me this time. I had stepped onto this path, and there was no turning back. I left the house silently, not wanting to disturb anyone. The darkness swallowed me as soon as I stepped outside. Everything around me seemed to disappear into the thick night. Yet strangely, I didn't need light to find my way. I felt the invisible force guiding me, step by step, as if I already knew where I was going. Every step was controlled by an unseen power. I walked through the forest, feeling as though time was slowing down. Each breath grew heavier, not from exhaustion, but because I knew I was approaching the point of no return. Then before me, once again, the gate appeared. This was no hallucination or dream. This time, it stood clearly in front of me, larger, more powerful. The cold blue light radiated from it, like a light that didn't belong to this world. It opened slowly, welcoming me as if I were returning from a long journey. I stood there, facing the gate, knowing I had no choice. The sounds in my head grew louder, no longer distant whispers. "Step through," they said to me, word by word, like an irresistible command. My body began to tremble, but not from fear. I knew I couldn't refuse. This time, I wasn't just a visitor. I was a part of the force waiting for me on the other side. With a heavy step, I moved toward the light, and then, just like before, everything around me disappeared. Space and time tore apart. I was pulled into the swirling vortex of blue light, and my world, everything I once knew, vanished. This time, I knew I had crossed the gate, and there was no guarantee that I would return. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in a completely foreign place, a world not meant for humans. As I passed through the gate, the world I had known disappeared completely. That blue light consumed me, pulling me into a new reality. Everything around me shifted abruptly. Instead of the familiar woods of maroon bells, I found myself standing in a completely different landscape, as though I had entered some realm between life and death. The sky above was not the usual blue, but a pale, ghostly gray, dim and thick like a heavy blanket of smoke. There was no sun, no stars, only faint, eerie lights glowing from an unknown source, casting a confusing light over the space. The ground beneath me was hard, not rock or dirt, but a cold, metallic surface, faintly echoing every step I took. I tried to calm myself, but I couldn't suppress the rising panic in my chest. I no longer had control over my steps. Some invisible force was guiding me, pulling me in a specific direction. Each step felt heavier, as though I was moving toward a place where I didn't belong. The sensation of being watched washed over me, as though thousands of invisible eyes were observing my every move from all directions. I ventured deeper into this strange place, and then I began to see them, floating figures in the air, but they weren't fully human. Their forms were distorted, pitch black, with no faces, no clear features. They just stood there, silently, as if waiting for me to approach. A chilling sensation ran down my spine, making every hair on my body stand on end. They made no sound, but their lifeless eyes pierced into me, as if trying to read my thoughts. The farther I walked, the more bizarre the surroundings became. Strange rocks jutted out from the ground, their shapes suggesting they had existed for thousands of years. Each stone bore ancient markings, as though written in a language of a world I had never known. I wanted to turn back, to run from this nightmare, but my legs refused to obey. Something or someone had taken control of my body. Then from afar, I heard it. A sound, not the soft whisper I had grown accustomed to, but a deafening roar. This sound didn't come from any creature I had ever known. It echoed from every direction, as though this space itself was trembling under the rage of something invisible, yet immensely powerful. I froze, unable to move, though my body was trembling violently. From the darkness of this strange space, a gigantic figure began to emerge. It wasn't human, or at least not a being that humans could imagine. Its form was irregular, towering, and enveloped in a pale blue light, as if it didn't fully belong to this world. It didn't move like a living creature, but floated effortlessly, like a dense cloud. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, emitted a blinding light, staring deep into my soul. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My heart pounded violently, threatening to break free from my chest, and each breath became a struggle. Everything around me seemed to melt, blurring under the gaze of the creature. I couldn't move, couldn't resist its power. And then, a chilling wind tore through the space, pulling me toward it, as if I were a speck of dust in the vast universe. Just when I thought I no longer existed, a powerful jolt brought me back to reality. I collapsed onto the cold ground, gasping for air as if I had just escaped death. When I opened my eyes, there was no gate, no terrifying figures. I was once again standing amidst the trees of maroon bells. Everything seemed normal, or at least it appeared to be. But I knew, from that moment on, I was no longer the David Cook everyone had known. Something had changed forever. The force I had faced wasn't done with me, and this time, I knew they wouldn't let me go. I didn't know when, but I knew I would disappear again. And next time, there might be no return. I had stepped into another dimension, a place where humans had no right to exist. What I encountered there didn't care about our existence. I was merely a small piece in their game. I struggled to sit up, my hands trembling as I reached for a nearby rock to steady myself. The space around me returned to the eerie stillness. But I knew this was not the peaceful silence I had once felt at Maroon Bells. Everything felt like a facade, staged and unsettling. I had returned to the world I once knew, but I could no longer perceive it in the same way. With every breath, every beat of the earth beneath my feet, I could sense that something was still watching me from afar, waiting for the moment to pull me back to the place I had just escaped. I staggered to my feet, trying to find my way out of the forest, but an overwhelming feeling remained, as though I was still trapped in a dream from which I couldn't wake. I knew I was back at Maroon Bells, but the path home seemed unfamiliar, shrouded in mist. The light in the sky had dimmed, and darkness crept in once more. I dared not look back, fearing the soulless figures I had encountered would reappear. Every step I took felt like sinking deeper into a nightmare. At that moment, I no longer cared about time or distance. I only wanted to escape the forest. Whatever awaited me outside, I was ready to face it, as long as it wasn't the supernatural force that had pulled me through that gate. But the further I went, a strange sensation began to stir in my mind, the urge to turn back. It wasn't what I wanted, but like an addiction I couldn't resist, a hidden pull from behind. I couldn't explain it. In my mind, I heard the calls, not the deafening sounds I had once heard, but soft whispers, as though someone was inviting me to return to them. A false sense of peace crept into my mind, trying to convince me that everything would be fine, that I only needed to step through that gate one more time. I stopped in the darkened forest, my mind overwhelmed with conflict. My reason screamed that I should keep running, but each step grew heavier, as if I were being dragged backward. A chilling wind swept through, and this time, it no longer felt like just a gust of wind. It carried with it a terrifying sensation, a reminder that something was still there, always watching me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to run, but my legs no longer felt like they belonged to me. In my panic, I realized I no longer had control over my fate. Every decision, every choice seemed to have been taken from me. I had crossed that gate once, and now, no matter how hard I tried, I would never fully escape it. And then the darkness behind me began to shift. I didn't dare turn around, but I could sense something approaching. A stronger gust of wind blew through, carrying with it a strange sound, like footsteps but with no one there. My heart raced and I understood. The time had come. I couldn't run anymore. In that moment, time seemed to stop. The sky, the ground, everything vanished. All sound ceased. And in front of me, from the darkness, the gate opened once again. This time, it wasn't a gentle invitation, but a demand. A summons that couldn't be refused. I knew if I stepped through again, I would never return. Whatever was on the other side of that gate had decided that I belonged to them. With heavy steps, I began to walk toward the gate, feeling as though I was stepping deeper into my own nightmare. And then, just a few steps away, I knew that I would disappear forever, swallowed into a world no human could ever comprehend. This time, I knew for certain there would be no return. I had met my fate. Just when I felt myself fully consumed by the nightmare, everything seemed to dissolve. I don't remember clearly what happened after I neared the gate for the second time. Everything became blurry. The strange light and eerie whispers seemed buried in endless space. Then suddenly, I opened my eyes and realized I was lying on the cold ground, right in the middle of the forest I had just tried so desperately to escape. This time, I didn't feel any panic, no bone-chilling wind, and no shadowy figures chasing me. I lay there, motionless, with an unfamiliar, yet strangely calm sensation. I knew that I had returned. Again. But just like the first time, I couldn't comprehend what had happened. Meanwhile, my family was once again thrown into the whirlwind of fear and worry. Sarah had been on edge for weeks, noticing the changes in me. My first return had filled her with joy, but also confusion, as she knew I was no longer the man she once knew. She could sense that I was drifting away from reality, but nothing could prepare her for my second disappearance. When I didn't come back after that late-night walk in the forest, Sarah couldn't keep her composure like before. She had seen the signs of change, and this time she knew I had been pulled into a nightmare from which no one could rescue me. Her heart was filled with fear, but deep down, she understood that something far beyond her control had happened. When I didn't come back after that late-night walk in the forest, Sarah couldn't keep her composure like before. She had seen the signs of change, and this time, she knew I had been pulled into a nightmare from which no one could rescue me. Her heart was filled with fear, but deep down, she understood that something far beyond her control had happened. The calls, the unanswered messages. Sarah no longer held out hope that I was merely lost or had encountered a minor accident like before. She knew this time was different. Once again, my family and friends were swept into a spiral of fear and despair. The police and rescue teams were mobilized again, but they couldn't find any trace of me. Everywhere they searched turned up nothing. No footprints, no clues. The forest had swallowed me whole once more, and this time, hope seemed farther away than ever. Sarah fell into a state of distress. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, waiting in silent agony as if a part of her heart had been irreversibly torn away. Every night, she stared at my photo hanging on the wall, praying for a miracle to bring me back again. But her faith began to fade with each passing day, with each hour that ticked by. Then, on a day no one expected, I suddenly returned, for the second time. It was early morning, just as the sun was rising over the mountains. Sarah opened the door, as she did every day, hoping to see something, anything, that would show I was still alive. And then she saw me, thin, filthy, but standing there on the doorstep. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Sarah rushed to me, wrapping me in a tight embrace, as though I would vanish again if she didn't hold me close. Tears streamed down her face, but this time it wasn't just joy. It was fear too. I had returned, but this time it felt different, more than ever. I could feel her gaze, those eyes filled with confusion and worry. She knew I had gone through something unexplainable. I couldn't understand how I had made it back either. But this time, I knew one thing for sure. Something far more terrifying was waiting for me. And I knew that even though I had returned, I would never fully escape the pull of the world beyond. The family was overjoyed that I was alive, but they could also sense the change. There were looks of suspicion and fear. They asked me what had happened, but I couldn't recount it. The memories of that place once again became blurry, as if a part of me had been left behind on the other side. All I could remember was the invisible nightmare, the lurking shadows, and the gate that had pulled me in. I had returned, but I wasn't sure I belonged here anymore.
Your story is truly captivating and intriguing, David. It keeps me on the edge of my seat, and I can't tear my eyes away from it. Like everyone else, I have so many questions running through my mind. What exactly are the things you've described? It's beyond my imagination, David.
After everything that had happened to me, I thought I would never have to face mysterious and terrifying stories again. But the strange thing is, once you've experienced unbelievable phenomena, the world seems to open a new door, one where similar stories begin to find you, as if there's an invisible thread connecting all these bizarre events together. It was during a conversation with a former police officer from South Africa that I realized I wasn't alone in these supernatural experiences. He shared a terrifying, unexplainable story about a man named Jory who disappeared in Namibia, and I suddenly understood that my experience wasn't unique. What was more frightening was that Jory's story wasn't just a simple case of disappearance. It was an enigmatic vanishing tied to entities not from our world. Jory, an ordinary middle-aged man, vanished under mysterious circumstances near the Orange River, a wild region of Namibia. Namibia, with its stark beauty of the Namib Desert and vast grasslands, is known for its majestic landscapes but also hides unsolvable mysteries. In this remote area near the South African border, there was an eerie disappearance that no one involved in the investigation could ever forget. The story revolved around Jory, a retired scientist living in a secluded farm near the Orange River, where he vanished without a trace. I met a former South African police officer who had directly participated in the investigation of Jory's disappearance. He recounted that at first they thought it was simply a search for a lost man, but the truth led them into a world more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. The strange details of Jory's disappearance, from the lack of any trace to eyewitness accounts of strange lights in the sky, sent chills down the officer's spine. Jory, of German descent, spent his retirement peacefully in Namibia, where he loved nature. But one day he left home as usual and never returned. When the police were called in, they scoured the area from dense forests to the Orange River, but found no trace of him. It was as if Jory had vanished into thin air. What made it even stranger were the eyewitness reports of unexplainable events. A local hunter named Tao said he had seen a blue light hovering in the sky on the night Jory disappeared. That light made no sound and suddenly enveloped Jory before pulling him into the sky. Hearing this, the officer knew the story had gone far beyond conventional understanding, and when he later met Jory after the mysterious man reappeared, Jory only said briefly, "They took me," before disappearing forever. The officer's account left me unable to stop thinking. What happened to Jory, and the way he mysteriously vanished and then reappeared, reminded me of my own disappearance. Could it be that some force beyond our understanding is manipulating human fate? And how many people like Jory are lost forever in dimensions we can't reach? Those thoughts continued to haunt me after hearing about Jory's disappearance. How many more people like him have vanished into a world we can't reach? And will I, or any of us, ever escape such a fate? Jory's story seems like a warning that the mysteries of this world still lurk in the shadows, waiting for us to slip up so they can pull us in. And I can't shake the feeling that, no matter how much I've escaped my own experience, those entities are still watching, waiting for the right moment to draw me back once more.
Thanks, David, for your mysterious stories.
Stories of mysterious disappearances have always held a strange allure for people, not only because of their mystery, but also due to the supernatural elements that seem to surround them. One particularly noteworthy theme is the strange connection between water, granite, and disappearances, a link that few seem to notice. The mystery lies in the fact that, for thousands of years, humans have believed in a deep interaction between nature, especially water and stone, and phenomena beyond the understanding of science. Enchanted Rock in Texas, a massive granite rock long considered sacred, is one such place. Native tribal legends suggest that Enchanted Rock is not just an ordinary stone but holds mysterious energy. People who climb the rock at night have reported hearing invisible footsteps, distant whispers, and at times, those who wander into it never return. Water has always been regarded as a symbol of life, renewal, and rebirth, but it is also seen as a fragile boundary between the human world and another realm. The host emphasized that, in many mysterious disappearance cases, water appears as a key element. For example, the Orange River, where Jory disappeared, is not just an ordinary river. Local people believe that beneath the river lies secret passageways to another dimension, and those who are swept into the water never return. Similarly, in other parts of the world, stories involving water and granite have also been recorded. Lough Derg, a sacred lake in Ireland, is believed to be tied to supernatural phenomena since medieval times. It is said that the large granite rocks beneath the lake have the power to open doors between worlds. Stories tell of people walking near the lake's shore during full moons who vanished without a trace, as if drawn into an invisible force beneath the water. In many places around the world, water and granite are often linked to sacred lands, and perhaps this is not just coincidence. Granite rocks often contain quartz crystals and other minerals believed to generate strong magnetic energy. Some supernatural researchers believe that areas where water and granite converge may act as gateways to other dimensions, where supernatural entities, or even extraterrestrial beings, can appear. Enchanted Rock, one of the most famous sites for mysterious phenomena, has existed in native legends for centuries. The program host recounted that according to native tribes in Texas, Enchanted Rock was home to ancient spirits. Warriors wounded in old battles would come here to recover, but many mysteriously disappeared. There are stories of nighttime climbers who feel as if they're being followed by something unseen. They hear unexplained sounds, and sometimes even footsteps echoing on the rock's surface, without anyone visible. A popular theory is that granite in these areas interacts with the Earth's magnetic field, creating magnetic anomalies. Researchers of such phenomena believe that places like Enchanted Rock might experience time and space distortions, causing people to inadvertently step into another dimension and vanish forever. One hypothesis proposed by supernatural scientists is that in regions where water and granite exist, strong magnetic energy could be a trigger for supernatural events. The host referenced a recent study on the magnetic fields at sites like Skinwalker Ranch, where UFO sightings, strange lights, and mysterious disappearances occur. The study showed that these areas had abnormal magnetic activity, which might explain why people who enter them disappear inexplicably. At Skinwalker Ranch, like many other places around the world, water and rock play an important role in explaining supernatural phenomena. Small streams running through the area are believed to be closely connected to the mysterious disappearances of animals and, sometimes, people. Stories of cattle being lifted by an invisible force, mutilated in bizarre ways, or strange lights in the sky all add to the mystery of areas linked to water and rock. The host also referenced a legend from African tribal communities where water and granite are considered the homes of spirits. Along the Zambezi River, near the border between Zimbabwe and Zambia, locals tell of many who vanished near areas of granite and waterfalls. They believe that ancient spirits living within the rocks dragged these people into the water to take them to the spirit world. This aligns with stories from other cultures, where granite and water are often associated with gateways to the spirit world. In Peru, the giant stones at Machu Picchu and other areas are considered sacred, not only because of their historical significance, but because locals believe that spirits and supernatural entities still interact with the human world through the rocks and water. Stories of mysterious disappearances in areas associated with water and granite may not just be ancient legends. They might contain some truth. These regions seem to have a special interaction with the Earth's magnetic fields and energy. Perhaps that is why, for centuries, humans have felt that these places hold supernatural power, where disappearances and strange events often occur.